Hello and welcome to the City of Games. My name is Frank, and today I would like to tell you a story about how this, the Isle of Cats, became this, Emberleaf. Now, I'm going to be really clear up front. I want to be very honest here. Emberleaf is not a sequel to the Isle of Cats. The games are very different games, and Emberleaf is a step up from the Isle of Cats. I don't want to put across this concept that these games are the same in any way, but what I want to talk about is some similarities and also the design process that took some of the core elements from the Isle of Cats and made Emberleaf. Because whilst it isn't a sequel, whilst the game is different, I do believe that Emberleaf is an evolution of learnings of mechanisms from within the Isle of Cats. And there are three core things that I really want to discuss and talk about within that. And also, I want to talk about why this is important. So let me just move these out of the way. And then let's talk about the why. When I decided to design Emberleaf, one of my goals was I wanted to create a game that was a step up from the Isle of Cats. Now, this doesn't mean I want it to be harder to learn. It doesn't mean I want it to be harder to approach. What it means is I wanted it to be deeper in terms of the strategic decision making. I wanted you to be able to have bigger, more complex problems to solve if you enjoy that. If you don't enjoy that, you can still play the game and you won't even necessarily be aware of some of those connections and that depth in there. But if you are looking for a heavier game, as we would say, I think that you'll find that Emberleaf has a good something to offer you. But let's talk about the specifics. Let's talk about those similarities. And why they exist is because if you have played the Isle of Cats and you go and pick up Emberleaf, there's a bit more to take on. But what I wanted to do was say, look, let's say that the Isle of Cats has, for simplicity, it had 10 pages of rules and Emberleaf has 12 pages of rules. What if those 2 extra pages of rules were the same rules as the Isle of Cats had? And it's not quite that black and white, but conceptually you'll see that some of the ideas are so similar that if you've played the Isle of Cats and you're familiar with it, that you'll immediately understand what you're trying to do, how to do it, and it will take some of the edge off that steeper learning curve that Emberleaf has to offer, making it a great step up. So in the same way the Isle of Cats had the family mode and then the standard mode, this is like, the next mode up from the Isle of Cats, like the advanced mode, I suppose. So let's take a look, and we'll start over here with the cat tiles. Now, if you're familiar with the Isle of Cats, you're going to know that we've got 5 different coloured cats. We've got purple, green, blue, orange, and red. And a lot of the game is about how you place these cat tiles together. Which colours do you want to get? What are you going to focus on? How are you going to position them? And because they're polyominoes, these like Tetris shape kind of pieces, you can figure out how they're going to go together and all of these different things. Now, if you jump over to Emberleaf, what you're going to notice is that there are also 5 different coloured tiles. And whilst these ones are hexagons and you don't have the complexity of how do the shapes interlock, you are going to notice that there are 5 different types, and these started off very similar to the cats. You still have to think about how are different colours going to go together? Which ones am I going to focus on? What's the patterns I'm trying to achieve whilst I'm placing them? And even right at the start of Emberleaf, the first scoring system we actually had was exactly the same as cat families. So in the Isle of Cats, you get points at cat families, having larger groups of cats of the same colour together. Whilst in Emberleaf, it started off with neighbourhoods, having sets or the larger groups of the same type of building together would score you points. And it was exactly the same system. However, I decided that thematically that just didn't make as much sense in Emberleaf, because having 5 town halls in one village was like, why would you do that over having, some houses and having a market and having a single town hall and so on. So over time it evolved slightly, and now it's just to do with having different types of buildings together, but it still has that same kind of heart, that same puzzly system of there are 5 different types of tiles. I'm probably not going to get all 5. I'm probably going to focus on one and then maybe have a secondary one, or maybe 2 or 3, and how am I going to place them and steer them? And this really was a direct kind of jump from one game to the other. Now, the next part of this is the lesson cards from the Isle of Cats. Now, I see lesson cards in Isle of Cats as one of the truly like great setting points in that game. Like, why is the Isle of Cats better than a lot of other polyomino games? And for me, that's because of these lesson cards. You're not always trying to do the same thing. In games where you just, you're just trying to fill the board, you're always going to get the same kind of tiles, you're always going to try and fill the same space, and so on. The replayability of that, the experience each time you play it, is more limited. Well, so the Isle of Cats, the lesson cards, they were designed to make it so that you were always trying to do different things. It's less about how do you fill all of the space, and it's more about how do you use the tiles to do interesting things based on your objectives within that space. And I love that. So with Emberleaf, I wanted to bring the same system over, but again, taking from some learnings and evolving that. So to start with, you can see over here, we've got 9 points if you have exactly 5 blue cats on your boat. Now, obviously, this is different, but you can see here, we've got have exactly 3 buildings in Hawker's Crossing. This was a evolution. Originally, this was much more similar, and it slowly evolved across. 10 points if you have the largest family of cats. Have the most windmills. 2 points per visible rat on your boat. 1 point per war banner. 2 points per filled room on your boat. Home at least 1 frog in 4 different clearings. 10 points if the middle row of your boat is full, and Miner's Rest and Greenleaf are both full. Now, don't get me wrong, these are not giving you the same objectives, and the way the game plays is so wildly different. But from a learning perspective, from an entry perspective, if you've played the Isle of Cats, you know how important lesson cards are. You know how many points they can give you, and you understand they're things that you have to work towards, and at the end of the game, if you've achieved them, then you're going to do really well. And the favor cards in Emberleaf, they are that same system, because I think it's a fantastic system. It means rather than everyone working towards that single goal, everyone is working towards different goals. And when you look at someone and you think, my goodness, why are you doing that? That's so strange. It's because this combination of cards means that doing something strange for them, or something strange to you, is great for them. And I think that is a fantastic way to play a game. So I took this system and I literally started by going through every single lesson card that I'd written for the Isle of Cats, and for every single expansion and all the ones that even didn't make it into the game, and tried to work out, do they make sense in Emberleaf? And we wrote them up and played with them and tested them, and over time we evolved them. But there are a couple of key learning things, and one of them I want to refer to as kind of like the accessibility of it. It's possibly not the right word, but when you play the Isle of Cats, if you're playing with the standard game, the base game with no expansions, you're going to have like the cards, and you're going to know that if you're playing with 4 players, that you're going to see all of those cards. The likelihood is you're going to see like 98% of the cards in the deck. So you can, if you've played the game enough, you can start pre-planning. You can go, okay, I know that there's going to be one which is like fill the edge of my boat. They don't really seem like they're working towards that, so maybe I'll work towards that. And then if it comes out later, they're probably not going to take it because it's going to be too hard for them. I've already kind of pre-done it, and therefore it's going to be good. Or, oh, let's make sure that the dining room is empty. I can see that Sarah over there's already filled the dining room, so I know if that's going to come out, she's not going to take it. So maybe I can leave my dining room empty. And the game becomes as much about predicting what cards are going to come out and knowing what's in the deck as it does about working. Like you're pre-working towards them because you hope you're going to get them. And of course the expansions add more variety to that, so it's going to take away some of that. And if you're newer to the game and you've only played it a couple of times, you're not going to be thinking to that level anyway. But I really wanted to just pull that out and make sure it didn't happen in Emberleaf. So there's 2 approaches to that. One of them is the fact that in the Isle of Cats, there are about, I think it's like 38 lesson cards in the base game. There's the 3 lesson modules, which is 24. And I think it's somewhere between 10 and 14 core cards in there as well. So I'll say 38, something around that. As I say, you're probably going to see all of them if you're playing with 4 players. In Emberleaf, however, there are over 80 different favor cards. In fact, if I just grab these from over here, you can see that this is a giant deck, and this is all favor cards. Every single one of these is a different objective that's going to score you points for doing different things. Now, what that means is when you play the game, you are not going to see all of those cards. I guarantee you're not going to see all of those cards. And for lower player counts, you're probably not even going to see like 15% of those cards. They are designed so if you play the game and then you don't even need to shuffle the discard back in and you play it again, you're probably still going to have enough, which means that you have no idea what cards are going to come out regardless of the player count. And it means that you can't just hope. I mean, you can still hope, but you're realistically got like a 50% chance of it coming out, let alone you getting it. So you just can't do that. Now, the secondary thing that I've done is that the favor cards in Emberleaf are far more diverse. So what that means is, whilst in the Isle of Cats, you can look at them and go, there's like 38 of them, as we said, and there's different sets. There's 5 of have exactly 5 blue cats, have exactly 5 green cats, have exactly 5 purple cats, and that's fine. But then 1 in 7 cards is have exactly 5 of a color. Whilst in Emberleaf, there are still that same concept, right? You're going to have 5 of, have the most windmills, have the most town halls, but because there are so many more cards, it gives room for so much more variation. So there's a very high chance that you're going to play a game and none of the have the most of X are going to come out. So rather than like in the Isle of Cats, we can go, okay, I'm going for red, you're going for blue, I'm going to hope the most red cards comes out, you're going to hope the most blue one comes out, and so on. In Emberleaf, none of that exists because there's just no chance that even one of them is guaranteed to happen. And that diversity in different strategies is so much wider. And the final thing, which is, I think, a big improvement for Emberleaf. And again, improvement is not necessarily the right word because you have a different game and things work differently in different games. But in the Isle of Cats, you do 5 rounds, and each round you have a card draft, and you are going to get cards each round, and you might get lesson cards, you might not, and you might take them, you might not. But it means that you have basically a 20-20-20-20-20 split, and when you get your lesson cards comes like literally every 20% of the game. Whilst in Emberleaf, you can get up to 8 favor cards, and 5 of them you can literally get on your first turn if you choose to do certain actions. Like, you can't get them all on the first turn, but you can take one of those 5, and then next turn the second of the 5, and so on. So if you choose to, you could get 5 cards really early, basically before you do anything else, rather than doing any other actions. For some players, you literally might go around and just grab all 5 of them, and that's not a bad strategy. It might not be optimal every time, but there are times where I've done it and it's worked out really, really well. So what I've done is I've shifted the weighting. So rather than it being every like 20% you can get some more, I've brought it down so loads of them happen at the start. If you want to, you can choose not to and you can take them later, but you have that option. And then as you progress through the game, the other couple open up if you choose that path. You don't even need to go in that direction. You may never take them. You might find that 5 is plenty, but if you want all 8 of them, you can work towards them and you can get them as soon as you want to. So for me, again, that's a really good improvement of that system, because not only have you got less idea of which ones am I going to get, which types am I going to get, but you have more control over when you get them and how early you get them. So this is, as I say, this is like 2 core evolutionary steps for the mechanisms in Emberleaf, where I've taken core concepts from the Isle of Cats, tried to understand the enjoyment and what people like about them, and then pulled them over into a new system to create something that's very different. And as I say, and I keep going to keep saying this, the rest of the game is wildly different. It's a very, very different game, but these 2 core concepts are at the heart. And if you're familiar with the Isle of Cats and you want to pick up Emberleaf, then what it means is that even if it might be a bit bigger than some games you might have played in the past, it's going to give you that easier step in, because you're going to understand the importance of colors and matching and grouping. You're going to understand the importance of favors or lessons and how you kind of get those and how you want to work towards them. So the final thing I want to talk about, and I don't have anything visual for this one, but again, it's it's my belief, and I used to be a programmer, and I used to say to people when I was a programmer that I truly believe that if you make something and then you make it again the second time, you should be able to do it better. And if you can't do it better the second time, then you shouldn't be doing it at all. Because for me, I believe you should always learn. And if you make something and just say it's perfect and you can't learn from it, then I don't think you're a great creator. And, maybe there are cases where that's not the case, but I think it's so important to always learn and always assume that you can do better. And one thing in the Isle of Cats has always bothered me. It doesn't really get raised very much by anyone because it's just an assumed thing that has to happen in a lot of games. And this is the fact that you and I can sit at a table. We can play the game for 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it takes. And then we finish the game. We had fun. We enjoyed it. Now we're going to spend 5-10 minutes with a piece of paper and a pencil, tallying everything up and working out all the numbers and then adding everything up. You might have to get a calculator. You might be comfortable doing it yourself. And depending on how you view scoring, you and I might sit down and I'll say, okay, let's add up our blue cats. You add up yours, I'll add up mine, I'll write them down. But I've seen people where they'll say, okay, what are your blue cats? What are your red cats? And then they'll go to the next person. What's your blue cats? What's your red cats? And they don't do it together. And it just takes a really long time. And the end of the game is where you should be the most excited and you should be talking about how great it was. And you can do that whilst you're scoring up. And then you're going to see who the winner is. And I like the fact that the winner is kind of a surprise at the end, so to speak. But it just takes away a bit of that fun in the same way that setting a game up at the start, you don't want it to take a long time. It's the same thing where you don't want the end of the game to be all focused about let's just do a load of maths. And Emberleaf started the same way. In fact, it has been the same way for the majority of its life. And I did I play tested with 100 people earlier this year, and all of them played with a system where you scored everything at the end. And no one mentioned it because it's just presumed to be the thing. I sat down and I said, let's try it. Let's change it. Let's work out how we can change some of the mechanisms and make it more interesting. Not just change it for the sake of changing it, but change the core of how some of these systems work so that we can score them as we go. And one of the great things in Emberleaf is there's a score track around the board. And as you're doing things, you're going to be scoring points. Now, the only thing you score at the end of the game is your favor cards. Everything else, which might be, 40 to 70% of your score, depending on what you're doing, is going to be scored as you go. And what this means is at the end of the game, all you have to do is add your favor cards to your total score. It means there's still a surprise. You still don't know who's going to win because you don't know which ones they've completed, how well they've done from them, how many points they're going to get from them. But it means that everyone can do it at the same time because it's a nice score track and it's very quick and simple because you don't have to do any calculations. You can just say, okay, I got 6 from this one, move on 6, got 6 from this one, move on 6. It does the adding for you. And it's a simple thing, but mechanically it was a major rework. But what it did do is it's added more interesting timing options and combo options into the game. A simple example of that is we used to have something which was at the end of the game, you get 1 point for every wood that you have in your resource. We've now changed that to at some point during the game, you can trigger a bonus that will score you 1 point for every wood that you've got, which means that if you can get to the point where you've got 12 wood, you can then try and score that 12 wood, and then you can spend that wood to do something else. So not only does it kind of speed up the end of the game in that scoring part, but it also just means that you've got more interesting timing systems inside the game that you can play with. As I say, I wouldn't say that's some revolutionary thing, but again, it's another evolutionary step of learnings from the Isle of Cats and trying to improve that experience, simplify that experience, and just make it better for Emberleaf. That's it. Those are the 3 core things that I've taken from the Isle of Cats and have really evolved into the heart and the growth of what Emberleaf is. As I say, again, I'm going to keep saying it, they're very different games. Emberleaf is a step up, but if you enjoy the Isle of Cats, if you enjoy the kind of competitive games that I make with that puzzly heart and that way those tiles interact with those cards, then perhaps Emberleaf is a game that you're going to enjoy. If you stepped up from the family mode of Isle of Cats to the standard mode of Isle of Cats, then Emberleaf could be considered that advanced mode of a different game. But similar kind of pathway. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below, and until next time, keep on adventuring.